Okay, almost there. Just organizing all the screens properly. Okay. All right. Very good. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Danny Beit-Or from Simply Do It. And I love to talk about real estate, to share my experience, engage with you guys. And this is tonight is one of, let's just say, a topic that I have a little bit of a fetish on one hand and obsession on the other hand. And we've been dealing with this question for many, many years. Um, I'll start by introducing myself so you know where I'm coming from and what is my background, and then you'll understand why this is a question I've been dealing with for many, many years. So I moved to the States in 2004 from Europe after already starting to invest in one property and some other investment in the US. And since I started when I was in 2002, and since 2004, when I moved to the States, I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area first, and then to Southern California, Orange County next. And for those past 20 some years, all I've been doing is investing in real estate personally, but primarily working with others, helping them do similar activity, similar investing activity. So since 2004, I have helped many clients buy well over 5,000 properties in multiple US metros, such as Arizona, Oklahoma, Florida, Texas, even Arkansas, Alabama, Missouri, Kansas, Texas, and more, Tennessee, and more. And for those 20 some years, most of my focus had been on either single family homes, duplexes, fourplexes, sometimes threeplexes, although that's not very common, some land, some commercial, some tax liens, and other things, some flipping, and few other things, but those are the main ones. The long-term residential rentals have been the main ones that we've been focusing on investing and helping other invest as well. And for those almost 20 years or so, every once in a while, I've had the opportunity to either set up my own event like tonight, either online or in the room, or get invited to speak to one group or another, mostly in the States, but in Europe as well, when I travel to Europe almost every year. And if there's one question that always, always, always comes up when I think every event that I put together or I participate or teach is the question of an LLC. Do I need an LLC? Do I have to have an LLC? Do I have to do it? Is it critical that I have an LLC? LLC this, LLC that. And you know what? I been talking about this topic, investigating this topic, having professional people from the industry, from the legal industry, come and talk at my events on this topic. And I am still blown away. There's a lot of, I don't know, some sort of a misunderstanding, or maybe not misunderstanding, but not a full understanding of this concept. So I wanted to put together a session that will kind of try to clarify more about this thing called LLC and how we should incorporate it into our lives as real estate investors. And that the purpose of tonight is to exactly kind of dig into that a little bit, put some perspectives, put some, things in the right boxes of understanding. And hopefully, that's always my favorite thing to do, is engage with you during the session and after the session with questions and things that are directly related to the topic, but also things that may be indirectly related to the topic, but related to real estate investing. So any of you that are here, if you have questions while I speak, I actually see the chat on the left, and you can definitely, I think, unmute yourself and kind of, jump into the session and ask your question one way or another. No problem whatsoever. I like engagement as I speak. If you feel like you rather wait until the end and ask your questions when we are done, when I'm done, it's going to be not a long presentation, then by all means do that. I call it not a Q&A session, but a Q&A session, but more of a Q and C, a Q and question and conversation. So let's dive into the details. I do want to kind of warn you about a couple of things. First of all, this is all based on actual experience. There is no me researching on AI, different things over in order to bring them to the table. I am fully based on my interpretation, my observation, my personal experience. When I say mine, it's my personal one, but I've also worked with so many investors for so many years that I've seen things, around me, so that benefited me, it taught me and benefited me as an investor. So by all means, real life experience and trenches. I also want to say that I'm coming to this as you saw quickly a disclaimer. I'm just going to say this is not a legal advice that I'm going to bring here. I'm not coming to this from a legal perspective. I am coming from sharing some perspective with you so you can go on as investors anywhere and be more educated about this whole concept of LLCs and not just be fed with what others are saying. Attorneys and other people, right? That's something that we see quite often. Before we dive in, I do want to make just few short announcements. The first one is I am actually super excited about this event that we're putting together in January of 2025. So about 2 months from now, there's plenty of time after the holidays, after we get back to our routine. And the reason I'm excited about this one, because this is going to be a community-driven event or community content-driven event. I'm going to facilitate, but I'm going to offer you to take part in this session. And the whole purpose of this session is not around the specific topic like LLCs or investing out of state or commercial real estate, multifamily, whatever, but rather have one or two members of our community come up and present to the group a deal that they would like to invest in, and to present it in a way that the group, the peers, the other investors could ask questions, get clarification, and provide some suggestions, advice, etc. So we will have one or two presenters. This is not an opportunity to do a platform to do a sales pitch, but rather, here's my deal, here's what I know. I would love to hear your feedback. And the reason we're doing it, because a lot of investors don't necessarily have the room, the place to bring their deal and get some critics and to get some feedback and to get some ideas and opinions about what they're missing or not missing, or just get the feedback if this is a terrible deal or a good deal or an amazing deal. So that's the whole purpose, right? So you're going to be either presenting or expected to contribute, ask questions, or at least learn from the process. So even if you're just sitting here in this event and you're listening, and maybe do not have a single question, you still have an opportunity to hear others asking questions and the presenter, the investor, kind of answering or figuring out if this is a relevant deal for that person or not. So I'm very excited. We've never done this before. I think it's a great opportunity to learn, to collaborate, to get others to kind of dive into the nitty-gritty of our deals. You are most welcome to join. It's free. We're going to ideally plan to hold it once a month. You only need to go to simplydoit.net/peer-review and register RSVP. That's it. And then you'll see the instructions if you want to be one of the presenters, how to provide us with some general information. And if you just want to be a participant, just RSVP. So that's coming up in about 2 months from now. Second thing I want to share with you is we have a lot of content that we put out, a lot of it, right? YouTube channel with more than 400 videos, educational videos, and a podcast channel with more than 200 educational episodes, and things that we put on Facebook, etc., and properties on our website. I want to share all that good stuff with you. This is really about providing content and quality content to our community of investors. We are not very strong or bullish on sales pitch, as you will see tonight. By the way, talking about sales pitch, if any of you are expecting some sort of a sales pitch at the end, some sort of a book course, book or tape or course or seminar or something like that at the end, and some promotion. Ain't going to happen. We're not going to do that. So you're in for some disappointment. Let's move on. Okay. So going back to our topic, the big question is that I've heard this question hundreds of times, many hundreds of times. I would say every single event. I call it the second most asked question that I received ever, right? If you want to know what's the first asked question, ask me towards the end. I'll gladly tell you, but this is the second most asked question. And I want to share with you kind of a little story or how I went about this topic altogether. So when I was a younger investor, both by age and experience, and I attended seminars like this one back in the day, more in the room and not online. There, every once in a while, there's an attorney gonna come up to the room, to the stage, and they're gonna talk. They're gonna put the fear into us investors, and they're gonna tell us how we must protect our asset. I agree. And if we don't protect our asset, this is the most litigious country in the world, but something, right? And fear, and put fear into us. And guess what? As much as they make perfect sense, and they do, at the end of their pitch, they're going to offer you their services. Today's special is not, our package is not $2,500, but $1,500. And if you bring a friend, it will be $500 more for that friend, right? I'm sure many of you have been to those events. I have many times. And as a younger investor in the journey of investing, I kind of bought into it, right? I didn't not buy into it, but I kind of thought it makes perfect sense. Obviously, this fear that they're coming from is not completely delusional. But at the same time, I'm thinking between myself about this topic, and I'm realizing something bugs me about it. There's something that I'm missing here. So if I am already 4, 5, 6 years, including going through the crash of 2008, and I am working on a large scale with interacting with many investors, but also interacting with many peers. This friend from this category, a lender, and this friend in property manager, and this one, and I talk to those people about those things, and I'm like, it kind of bugs me. If this is the case, how come I'm not hearing left and right on investors being sued by tenants or whatever on their properties, and they're either losing their properties left and right because they don't have an LLC, or they have an LLC and it protected them? And I was wondering about this for quite some time. I was like, kind of, what am I missing here? And then when I realized this is something that kind of bugs me quite a bit, I started asking at the different events that I've attended as a speaker, and as kind of whenever that question came up, and it always did, I turned back to the crowd and say, you guys, before we dive into it, can you share with me here, anyone, do you have a story of a situation where either the LLC saved you or the lack of LLC did, did not, you lost everything because the lack of the LLC? And I was very clear when I asked the question. I said, I need you to tell me your first-hand story. Don't tell me a copy-paste story of a friend of a friend of a friend that you heard in an event, some BS, right? I'm not interested in that. I want a story of you telling me. And by the way, guess what? I am now telling you, all of you that are on this webinar, if you have a story to share, either here in the chat or when I'm done, or tell me afterwards because you want to keep it more personal and private, please do. I do want to, I'm anxiously looking for those stories, the real stories, right? So we can either learn from them, so I can also see that they're actually happening out there. I'm sure they're out there, but so far, I have asked in probably well over 400 events, I'd say even 500 events, this question. Tell me, give me, share with me a story, either now or in person and private. Just share with me something. And I sadly have to say that up until today, I only got one story one story. About 10 years ago in the Bay Area, we're holding this event. I asked this question. One of my friends, who is not a client of Simply Do It, but I know him through the community of the events because he attended many of them, says, I have a story for you, Danny, and here is my story. Me and my wife bought a house somewhere in Colorado. We rented it out. One day, some guy, some person cut over or cross over our lawn. Something happened. It's not the tenant, broke their leg and sued us, right? And I'm like, all right, so you had an LLC and you survived. It says, sorry to disappoint. I did not have an LLC. I'm like, oh my God, you lost everything. He says, no, I'm sorry to disappoint you once again. I did not lose everything. I'm like, man, tell me what happened. Okay, what was the outcome? He said, here's what happened. They sued. We went to the insurance. They sued for $50,000. The insurance settled on 25. Story closed. I'm like, oh, that was such a nice almost story. I wish it had more into it, but you know what? I'll take it. That's the only single story. This is not me hearing someone else. I know the person personally. We talked many, many times. He actually, I think, was one of our recent webinars this year. I can't remember when. He shared, he was here. Very nice guy. This is not a copy-paste story from someone else telling me. That's it. I have one story of an almost. So now that tells me if I am actively for more than probably 15 years, actively looking for stories, asking in every opportunity that I have, give me the story, give me the story, give me the story. Where is the story? Tell me the story. Someone will maybe jump in eventually. And the fact that I am unable to find a story for someone who's actually looking, and again, I'm sure the stories are out there, kind of put it a little bit in perspective. Kind of start 15 years ago when I saw that I couldn't find the stories, started asking me, what the heck is going on here? What am I missing here? And this is where I'm coming from. I am not going to tell you if to do or not to use or not to use LLC. I want to put it in perspective for you so you have a bit better understanding. So first of all, please, please, please remove the LLC from the pedestal. It is not something that should be on a pedestal because so many investors are so stuck on this point. Yes, LLC, no LLC. I should open an LLC first and then start investing. And well, wait, hang on a second. Let's just put it in more, let's connect it to real life and let's explore what and when we should do when it comes to LLC. Now, when I ask people, when they ask me the question about an entity or an LLC, and I ask them, why would you own an LLC? Usually the simple answer is for asset protection, for hiding assets, for tax benefits, and maybe some other ones, okay? So let's tackle especially the asset protection in a moment, but I want to talk about the hiding asset because I think there's a little bit misconception here. It is my personal opinion, and I'm pretty good with it. I wouldn't say I'm amazing, but I have a lot of experience. There's a very good chance that if I need to trace someone's properties, it would not be difficult, right? It would not be difficult for me to trace. So hiding properties, yes, it can be done. You probably need to put a lot of effort in order to fully hide it from someone like me, right? Who knows, have tools, has experience with finding properties. And I don't think I'm an expert. And I think that if someone really wants to find your properties, such as a private investigator or does it for a living, they'll be able to do that. So my first assumption that I want to kind of burst the bubble here, I think that even if you are buying it into for that reason of hiding assets, I would assume you won't be able to hide assets. And by the way, should you get to the court situation, God forbid, and you have to disclose all your assets, you probably need to disclose all your assets anyway. So just putting things in perspective. Taxation, kind of complicated to really answer it because there's always connected with something else. Maybe you were foreigners, maybe you're doing other things in your life, etc. So it's not something that I would say yes, no, of course. It's really taxation always comes with a bigger package or baggage of scenario that actually makes sense to use or not necessarily makes sense to use in LLC. Right? I'm using LLC. It should be entities, but LLC is the common word we're all using. Let's talk about let's talk about let's talk about the asset protection. So I want to talk about the asset protection for a moment. So here's my take. So first of all, I want to say that what are you protecting? It's really important to understand what is it you're protecting, right? If you are protecting one asset, many assets, so it's kind of start asking yourself some questions. Do I need an entity or an LLC? Well, it comes down to what you're protecting. If you have, for example, one single family home rental property with 80% mortgage or even 75% mortgage and barely any equity, there's not a lot to protect at the moment, right? I'm not saying you should or shouldn't. I'm just saying, again, think about it for a second, right? Also, you probably want to ask yourself, are you buying a residential or a commercial piece of real estate? In the commercial world, right, and in the commercial mortgages for residential properties world, using an entity is common practice. For whatever reason, we're not going to dive into it, right? It's common practice. So if I'm buying commercial property, the lender is expecting me or is even set up, or there many times have their own reasonings why the lenders would want me to put the asset in an entity in an LLC. Also relevant to residential properties when using commercial lending. Commercial lending for residential properties, it is possible, it is doable. One of the challenges when you are buying a residential property and you want to obtain the best terms you can get for the mortgage is that conventional mortgages typically, I would say almost always, do not want to lend to an entity. They want a person behind the property. So right there, if you want to buy through an LLC outright and you are trying to obtain traditional, conventional residential mortgage to get the best terms possible, which are, I'd say, always better than commercial lending terms, the lender will tell you, I'm sorry, we are not lending to an entity, only to an individual. So that's where you're going to encounter your first challenge with buying an inside in an entity, an LLC. Yes, it is possible, and if you want to, and maybe if we have time in the Q&C to go over some details, it is possible after you buy your property under your name, you can transfer it into an LLC. It's called quitclaim. It's doable. There is some complexity with it, so we can cover that maybe a little bit later, but it's doable. But just outright buy through the entity, the lender will tell you, sorry, we don't do that. So that's just something to think about. For me, it's all about the risk, right? What are you protecting or what is your risk? For example, if you're buying a property that you're planning to flip, that means there's some renovation, people coming in and out of the property. That may be a more of a higher risk type of a scenario, and you may want to consider putting it into an entity, even if you're not using partners. If you're using partners, it makes it even more comfortable to set it up as an entity because the partners are not necessarily going to be partners in the property. They're going to be partners in the entity that holds the property. So there are scenarios such as flipping. Maybe if you're buying cash, maybe if you're buying lower end property that potentially may have more challenges, friction issues with tenants. So anywhere you're going in and you're saying, you know what, I have a lot of risk involved in this type of a transaction, maybe considering putting it in an LLC makes sense. But when you're buying outright residential with a conventional mortgage, it's not necessarily always always the case. Now, if you are someone who's kind of stuck at the starting point and you're like, I should start by starting, I'll open up my LLC first and then I'll start buying the properties. I think that would be the opposite, unless it's a commercial property, that would be the opposite order of business. You should probably focus on buying first and opening the LLC second. There are multiple considerations for it, such as if you're looking at multiple states, where should you open the LLC? Yes, you can open LLC one in one state, let's say Wyoming, and then register it in another state, and let's say Missouri. You can do that, but all those things, they add more administration, more hustle, a little bit more cost. Sometimes we should focus on or try to minimize the admin side or the hustleness in our life and try to keep it simple. So, by the way, in most states, you can put an offer, and while you are under contract and moving forward with the transaction, you can open the LLC almost at the same time. So even if you don't have an LLC, when you put an offer, there's a very good chance that you can have the LLC ready and set up by the time you are ready to close. I do want to talk about elaborate a little bit more on the asset protection aspect of it, because I think that's like the most misinterpreted item. And okay, so I want to talk about this for a second. So when we talk about asset protection in our rental property, I look at our asset protection as a scheme, as a multiple layer kind of a protection. At the bottom of our protection scheme, there's insurance, right? Property insurance. Just get a policy for liability and other things for my property. Rather simple and rather inexpensive. Well, you know what? It could be not cheap in some states, and it could be a lot of hustle to shop for the right policy. But once it's rather simple, because you just need to put the time into talking to all those insurance agents. We have actually set up a partnership with with a company that specializes on rental properties, and they provide better rates to our investors, our clients, because of our buying power. They add some discount because of that. So get an insurance policy. Rather simple. Second thing is for liability. Remember, I'm talking about getting sued and something happened. It's called an umbrella insurance. What is an umbrella insurance? A typical umbrella insurance covers you only on liability. On your rental properties, the liability coverage of the umbrella starts where the liability coverage of the single property policy stops, right? So if, for example, if I have a policy on my rental property for $300,000 coverage of liability, and my umbrella is $1 million, anything up to $300,000 will go on the basic policy, and above $300,000 will go into the umbrella policy. The umbrella policy is a little bit tricky because the umbrella would probably want you, first of all, to move your main liability assets into the umbrella or into the company that provides the coverage, and only then the rental properties. And that means you're probably going to need to move your car or vehicles into the umbrella, into the company that covers you for the umbrella, and your primary, whether it's a rental or your primary residence, and only then you can start bringing your own rental properties. Liability insurance coverage in an umbrella, the umbrella aspect layer, is relatively cheap. You can probably get for few $100, $1 million or more liability, per year. So it's not an expensive item. By the way, if anywhere you meet insurance that it's relatively cheap, that usually tells you maybe there's actually something there. If people were suing on liability items left and right, my guess, an umbrella insurance policy would be not cheap at all, right? So that's usually how it works, and that should give you a hint what's happening here, in terms of all those asset protection things. So we talked about insurance, layer number one, umbrella, layer number two, and then I should say the most important one probably, and it's probably layer number three, take care of your property. What do I mean by that? Do not let your property get neglected, or don't be stupid on little things. I have seen situations where someone was kind of fighting or arguing with a tenant or with the property manager over little things, such as an exposed wire or a broken, electrical panel and stuff like this, or a wire that it's not fully secured. Really inexpensive items, and the argument sometimes was, who's responsible for it? Is it my fault, or am I as the owner, or is it the tenant fault because they moved something? You know what? If it's so cheap, get it fixed first, remove the liability of the way, and then argue with the tenant who needs to cover it, right? So remove the exposure out of the way, you should be in a much better shape, right? So many times when we buy properties, and in most cases, there is some, we get the inspection report, we can clearly say what is more cosmetic, what is more preventive, and what is more liability, right? And when it comes to the liability, that's where we don't cut corners. If the deck is wobbly, we will secure it. If the handrail is not, is kind of shaky, we'll secure it. If there is a cable or electrical panel or something like this exposed, we will take care of it immediately. That's not even a question. That's just, for me, I'm removing the liability out of the way. So if you're thinking so far, if you follow me and you're here at point 1, 2, and 3, or layer number 1, 2, and 3, probably if you do those 3, you'll probably be very well protected with your property, because you have insurance, an extra layer of umbrella, and you do not neglect as an owner. You actually remove liability issues as much as you can tell, as much as you know about them when they show up quickly, in order to not have something escalated, right? And then it can be a problem. Only when you have those 3, I would start considering doing number 4 on a case by case, right? So maybe include it, maybe not. It really comes down to, I would say, mostly the type, mostly what you're protecting and what is the risk you are thinking about in mind. Good. So that being said, I'm hoping that I was able to give you some considerations and thinking about LLCs, yes or no, and when to do them and when not. What I want to do next is I want to give you some couple of things about Simply Do It, and then we can dive into the Q&C, the question and conversation. So by all means, if you have any questions, you can either unmute yourself, you can type in the chat, and and I'll be very happy to continue our conversation and talk about LLCs or talk about other things related to real estate investing. And I just want to mention Simply Do It, my company. We work with investors, helping them to facilitate buying out-of-state rental properties. As I mentioned earlier, we've helped others buy over 5,000 properties in multiple US metros. We are mainly focused on buy and hold long-term residential rentals, and these days primarily active in Greater Nashville, St. Louis, Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, Birmingham, Alabama, and others, right? When I say others, those are the ones that are less active, but we're still doing stuff over there. So if you want to start investing, if you want to consider investing, if you're stuck as an experienced or a beginner, you're not sure where to go, how to start, you are most welcome to get in touch with us. We do what we call a strategy session or welcome session, not a sales pitch, kind of dive into the specifics of your questions, concerns, situation, 1031 exchange, maybe you've invested in the past and you got kind of unsuccessful. I had a conversation with someone like this earlier this week. Those are the type of things we try to kind of iron out, discuss, address, answer, whatever you feel like. Usually 30 minutes, 45 minutes. We're not saying never with a stopper on finishing up. We can do that in person if you are in Orange County, by phone, Zoom, whatever you want. If you are interested in meeting with me one-on-one in one of those formats, just go to our website and complete our intake. Our intake is 3, 4, 5 minutes of you providing some information. No social security is needed. No credit card is needed. Just general information, some questions, so we can get a little bit more efficient and we can get better prepared for the meeting. I am looking forward to speaking with every one of you. And when I meet, I want to make it as productive as possible. And the intake helps me make it more productive and helps me become more prepared for the session. So if you want to speak with me, just go to simplydoit.net/intake. Take a few minutes to complete the form. We'll reach back and schedule a time. And I want to remind you of the special session we're doing, the peer review, where you can bring your deal for the group, the community, to give you some feedback on your deal you're thinking of, some questions, making sure you didn't miss anything. This is an opportunity for a collaborative session and not a presentation. It's not a sales presentation. It's purely to bring us investors together, to learn from each other, to share with each other, to help each other. We'll do 1 or 2 presenters per session. The others are expected to contribute by knowledge, experience, advice, etc. So that's coming up. And if you want to sign up for this, it's free. Go to simplydoit.net/peer-review. Here's my contact information. If you want to reach out to me outside of those channels or mediums. And that being said, I am ready to take on questions or have your comment. If you have a story to share about the LLC that you set up or didn't set up, please do. I'm here. We can talk about other things related to real estate. If you are someone who are debating what to do, you're stuck about something related to real estate, by all means, you can use this platform. This is what we do it for.
I have a question about taxes. So,
all right, taxes.
This is Chad. Yeah, you had a bubble on taxes, and I guess the question is there anything that you can write off in an LLC that you wouldn't be able to if you didn't have an LLC?
Okay, so does the LLC basically provides you a write-off scenario that you wouldn't be able to do as an LLC, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
basically. Yes.
Okay, basically, that's fine. Okay, so I'm gonna answer this in a very general way, because sometimes some of those questions I feel that I reach my own personal expertise limit. So sometimes it may be better ask with the right professional. But this is how I perceive it for the past many, many, many years. So let's just say we are at the end of 2024. Let's just say in 2025, Chad, I'm going to pick on you because you asked the questions. You've accumulated 5 rental properties, right? So we are now at the end of 2025. Sorry, the end of 2025. You have accumulated 5 rental properties, and you did not set up yourself in an entity by any means. If you have the ability to, in your mind, create this virtual company, right? Instead of actually going and registering a company with either California or another state, let's just say in your mind, you call it the Chad investment portfolio, right? LLC, or don't even call it an LLC, just call it, corporation, whatever. Just give it a name as it sounds like you're operating, as a company. In that box, that virtual company doesn't exist. Virtual companies do not exist, but I'm just thinking, let's just say we created this virtual company, you created this virtual company, and that virtual company is actually oversees everything related to your properties. That virtual company has expenses, right? Let's just say one of those expenses is rent that it pays for the room in the office it's using in your house, right? Plus the electricity it's using, plus the water, utilities, etc. Let's just say that corporation is printing documents, so it needs a printer, it needs a laptop, it needs paper, ink, pens, blah blah blah, everything, right? So what I'm trying to tell you is that even if you are not officially establishing an entity, the way my understanding is, and this is where I'm a bit careful what the tax expert will say, but it's my understanding that you can still operate as if all those expenses are part of your operational activity related to the properties. So let me give you an example. I subscribe to a legal consultation service called Legal Shield, right? I'm a subscriber of that service. It's not expensive for more than 10 years. And every time I need legal advice, small or big, I come in, I get an attorney on the line, and I get consultation, right? It's pretty sweet. Sorry, it's pretty cheap. Let me put it this way. So that has been one of those things that I've used a lot. And it's really well worth it spending. Probably as an individual with a job, maybe a small business of my own without all this investing activity, I would not have subscribed to this service. I'm only subscribing it because of my real estate activity. So all of a sudden I have this expense that I can attribute to my real estate activity, regardless if I'm using an actual entity or not, because it's right there. It's justified. So anything you can justify, you can allocate or attribute to the real estate activity. I think it is my understanding that you can do it regardless if you actually have a company or if you're in your mind using a virtual company. The only reason I'm saying use in your mind a virtual company because I'm trying to simplify this abstract notion to you. That's the only reason, right? When you do your taxes and you own multiple rental properties, one or many, there is on your taxes what's called Schedule E. Schedule E is where you list your income or your expenses or activity from rental properties. On your Schedule E, there is a way where you put your rental income for the year, and then you have all the expenses, utilities, property management, HOA, and some space to add legal, right? And then they have few open places that you can write your own other expenses. So then you can say rent, right? Rent that you're paying as part of this operation, you can add it over there, and that would be a tribute to that property. So there is a way how to not only think about it, but also where you plug it in your taxes. And it's my personal opinion, without being a tax expert, that you don't actually have to have an entity in order to operate like an entity. I want you to think that you're operating as an entity, as an LLC, regardless if you have one or not. Actually, Chad, the way I tell my clients to behave, this is, you're not buying a rental property, you are buying a small business. Every one of those rental properties are a small business. And let me illustrate it very well. It's a very straightforward, simple, small business, tiny business, because your business is, you have a customer, it's the tenant. The customer actually is engaging with you in a contract. So it's a contract to be your customer. That's a lease agreement. Then you have a part-time employee In our world of real estate, they call it property manager. You can actually look at them as your employee, and you should actually supervise them like an employee, right? Maybe a mid-level manager and management employee, and not a simple employee, so to speak. But if you think of, here, here's my tiny business. I have one client, I have one employee. I just need to make sure my operation works without a hiccup. That means I will supervise my employee and ask for updates and follow up on them when needed, as I do with business, which is I don't know, maybe I have a little online store, and I have 4 warehouse guys that are work for me part-time, and I need to make sure they're doing the work, right? So that's very similar, in a similar way. And then I have to make sure that the client who signed an agreement to be my client is actually behaving according to that agreement, right? I didn't say any word about LLC or entity whatsoever. So I'm just trying to put it in a framework that helps you understand you're buying into one tiny business. By the way, your tiny business will be so successful, you will start self-franchising it. Self-franchising it means you'll buy one tiny business, then another one, and another one, and another one. That's kind of, if you really want to think about this concept in a business world, and not in a I buy a house, a home, because we're not buying a house or home. We're buying tiny businesses. It so happens it's a box with a roof and shingles and door and garage, and one client at a time, and clients move in and move out. So that's kind of how I like to think about it myself, and try to teach our clients or explain to them how they should look at it as well. And by the way, when you do that, it also helps remove or trim down the emotional involvement aspect out of the way. And once you remove those emotional aspects, it helps you conduct your affairs in a business. In a business, we know things do not always work smoothly and perfectly. And when they do not, we respond as a business owners to navigate those situations, right? When we think about the house that we painted and it was beautiful, and a tenant came through and they kind of ruined that paint, I'm not saying it's a fun thing to do. We are very emotional about it, because hey, what did they do? I have to find them. I have to go after them. Okay, two different, same situation, no difference the outcome, just very different how we perceive it. Does this long answer make sense?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Thank you for breaking the ice and being the first one to ask. Are there any other questions? Should I pick on someone randomly? Comments, conversations, other things? All right, guys, if this is it, I will ask you now to pull your pen and paper, and I'm going to examine you on the content for tonight's presentation. I'm not, just joking. All right, everyone, thank you very much for participating, for joining me this evening. I hope to talk to you soon through a one-on-one session or in one of our future events. Thank you very much for spending this evening with me. Have a terrific rest of your day, night, week. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.